Thank you. Joining me now is Vali Nasser, former senior advisor to U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan, now a professor at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming in. That embassy is perhaps the most powerful symbol of U.S. permanence in Iraq, a nearly $1 billion building built after the 2003 U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. Do you think the administration fully planned for all of the unintended consequences that would come after that authorization of force this past weekend?
I don't think so. Otherwise, the mob would not have breached the reception area and set it on fire. I think what the administration didn't count on at all was Iraqi nationalism. They may have thought about a terrorist attack, a rocket attack, some kind of Iranian response, but they didn't really think that if you attack an Iraqi base, kill Iraqis, don't call the prime minister ahead of time, don't get his support, don't even try to do it under an Iraqi umbrella, that somehow if the United States acted on its own in Iraq, Iraqis would not find this a violation of their sovereignty and they would not react. And I think, continuously saying that this is an Iranian-backed mob, which it is, misses the point that there's a lot of Iraqis that are angry at the way that the U.S. has behaved. And this has a potential of ultimately bringing into the streets a lot more Iraqis than just the Iranian-backed militias.
And yet, on the other side, the Trump administration has made clear that if a U.S. soldier or service member, or in this case a contractor, is killed by Iran or an Iranian-backed militia, that they would respond. So they set a clear line and they abided by it.
They did, but the problem with the president's policy towards Iran is that he thought that he can browbeat the Iranians anytime he wants and he's not going to get a response. And the Iranians are also telling him that, look, we can also respond. This time it might not be a Benghazi, but it might be a Benghazi in September 2020, right before the elections. So we have ways of pushing back against you. And this is a president that didn't want to go to war in the Middle East, did not want to put troops in the Middle East, called the Iraq war a fool's errand during the campaign. And the Iranians are basically sending him signal that the path that he's going with Iran is going to end him up in a war. Does he really want that? And you can see Trump is struggling with that. He wants to be tough on Iran, but he really doesn't want to go to war with Iran, and in some ways he's checkmated himself with Iranians.
Yeah, it's a great point because President Trump, as you say, he likes to talk tough. There was that tweet yesterday where he said Iran will be held fully responsible. But how does he negotiate that push and pull between wanting to put up a strong front and yet not being drawn into this Middle East tinderbox that he's tried to avoid?
He's not. He's actually just gliding down a path that he didn't want to go to, largely because his entire policy towards Iran is based on false assumption that we're going to put sanctions on them, they're going to absorb it, they're not going to respond, and they're going to bring out a white handkerchief and come to the table and surrender to me. And the Iranians are not playing according to his expectations, and he actually doesn't have a plan B. He doesn't really know how to get to the table with them. So periodically, the Iranians pinprick him, and then he has to talk tough. And every time he's coming closer to a war. And if he ends up in a war in the Middle East, it would be basically much worse for the United States. We're going to get entangled in a war with a country of 80 million people, which is orders of magnitude more difficult than Iraq. And I don't think we want another $5 trillion war with hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the Middle East, but that's where Trump is heading.
So we've articulated the problem. In the 30 seconds we have left, what's the solution? In 30 seconds or less.
Well, the solution is that ultimately Trump has to find a way to the negotiating table. And the Iranians have laid it out, is that they want some kind of a sanctions relief in exchange for behaving better, both with the nuclear deal and in the region. And Trump has not found a way to get there, largely because he's locked into an election and doesn't want to seem weak by giving Iranians anything.
Vali Nasser, it's great to see you as always.
Thank you.
Thanks great to have your insight here at the desk this morning. 2020 kicks off with a new round of threats from North Korea. Kim Jong-un announcing plans to introduce a new strategic weapon, as he calls it, hours before